Hi everybody, my name is Paul Duke. I've been invited by MAKI from Writers Carvings to say a few things today about one of my favorite subjects, writing. Now I'm going to discuss this today in a very informal way, and I'm going to answer a series of questions as a means of structuring this discussion. The first question, of course, is who are you? As I said, my name is Paul Duke. I'm an English instructor in Vancouver, Canada. I'm also a writing coach, YouTube creator, and host of a weekly live stream called Hard-Boiled English Live. My YouTube channel is called The Grammar Detective. I'm also a writer. I write fiction, short stories, novels. I write a blog. I write emails. I write social media posts. I constantly write. And I also write scripts for videos that I make and movies that I work on. So for me, writing is the center of everything I do. And as an English teacher, my favorite thing to teach is writing. It's become sort of a specialty of mine. More recently, I've developed an online digital writing course for those of you who are interested in improving your writing skills. This writing course is available in the links below. This passion for writing started when I was a child, and it started with reading. Reading and writing are interlocked. They are two sides of the same coin. When I was a child, I could never read enough. School would assign me books, and I'd read them very quickly, and then, hungry for more, ask the teacher for new books to read. On weekends and evenings when my mother needed a babysitter, instead, she'd send me to the local library, and I'd spend the entire day in the library. The librarian, of course, would watch out for me, but for me, it was like exploring another world, the world of my imagination. I fell passionately in love with reading. Those of you who write understand this transition, though. When you read a lot, you start feeling the urge to write yourself. Because as you read and you start to absorb sentence patterns and paragraphs and stories, you start to develop your own ideas about how to do that. And you develop a hunger to write. So that's where it started for me. As a child, I wrote stories, submitted them to my school. I wrote essays in high school when other students hated writing essays. I loved it because essay writing was a chance to express my views and opinions in words. So my relationship to writing is very, very close. After I left it on the shelf for many years, later in my adult life, I came back to writing because for years I hadn't written and I constantly felt the need to write. If I had a chance to write a business report, for example, I found myself wanting to write literary sentences, to use metaphors and simile when I should be just writing a clean, boring business report. So this passion to write was always hiding in there and always struggling to come out. I began writing short stories, some of which were published. I began writing novels, some of which I'm still working on many years later. And I'll come back to that because it's an important idea. In university, I wrote lots of essays. If the teacher told me to write a 5-page essay, I'd write 10. I wanted the teachers to notice my writing and encourage me and give me feedback. So I always went overboard with the writing. If you're a writer, you know it in one simple way. You can't not write. Even when you're doing something else, like exercising or working at your job or going for a walk, your mind is always hungry to write. That's an indication that you should write all the time, that you need to write, that it's part of you, the way an athlete needs to move, or a singer needs to sing when they're in the shower or they're going for a walk in the park. If you're a writer, you know it because you are compelled to write. You are forced to write. You have no choice but to write. It's not just that you love it, it's that you have to do it. Now, that doesn't mean only people with that compulsion should write. I think everyone should learn how to write. And we'll talk about that shortly too. I think writing, speaking, and thinking are all interconnected. If you want to learn to be a better thinker, it's very, very important to write. Writing means to me a way of thinking. It's an external way of thinking for me. When I have ideas or thoughts on my mind or feelings, having them just run around in my head is not good enough. I need to write them down so I can make them clear to me. Even if I never show someone the piece of work I've written, I need to write it in order to make things clear for me. I'll give you an example. Not long ago, I lost my father. He was 87, his health had been failing, and he died one Monday morning. Very quickly, my family organized the funeral, and very quickly we said goodbye to him. And during that time, some people offered to make speeches about him, but I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I needed more time to think about how I felt about my father's passing, and I needed more time, and I'm still working on it. So for me, writing is important because it's a way to clarify my thoughts. My thinking and my writing are intertwined. In other words, I can't just think in my brain. I need to think on paper or on the computer. And if you're like me, you'll understand that feeling where it's not enough to feel something or think it. You need to write it in order to feed back to yourself and understand what you're thinking and feeling at that time. So that's what writing means to me. It's a means of articulating my ideas and my thinking. It's also a means of expressing and articulating my own feelings back to myself and, of course, to others. So the second point I would say about this is that writing is a means of communicating with other people. Remember, when you write something and then someone reads it, you're no longer there with them. They might read it online. They might read it on paper. They might read it in a published piece, a magazine or a book. In any case, you're no longer there, so it's not a conversation. And therefore, writing has a higher responsibility. It's a greater challenge than speaking. Why? Because you're not there, so if the reader doesn't understand what you wrote, they can't ask you to clarify it. So the writing has to be clear the first time. It has to explain everything that needs to be explained or tell everything that needs to be told on paper or in the text, because the reader can't ask you for more, right? It has to be all there. But that's okay, because when you write something, you have more time than when you speak. If I'm having a conversation with you and I say something, well, it's your turn to say something too. And then we go back and forth pretty quickly. Even though I'm a native speaker, for example, oftentimes when I'm speaking, I make mistakes because I'm going too quickly, right? And sometimes we move on to another topic before I've said all my ideas or all my thoughts on the topic. But with writing, everything slows down and you can take your time to say it the way you want to say it, exactly the way you want to say it, and include everything you want to say and take out what you don't want to say and fix the errors that you make. We all make them. So writing for me is a way to communicate precisely and comprehensively, fully, because you can take your time to make it more accurate. That's an incredible power. I also think, for those of you learning to write or learning to write in English as a second language, if you can do this, you have what some scholars call a superpower. Because if you can write and articulate your ideas in text, you have the ability to change people's minds, okay? You have the ability to persuade people to do things, to take actions. You have the ability to entertain people. With good writing skills, you have the power to impact the world and change it. So make no mistake, everybody. Work on your writing. It is a superpower right here on earth, and you don't need to be magic to learn how to write well. Now, a lot of you are learning to write in English as a second language, and I understand that can be very challenging. Maybe you're already an excellent writer in your own language, but as you learn English, you encounter some frustrating problems. So I'd like to talk about those too. When we grow up and we read books or essays or articles, and we admire the writing, we read it and say, oh, that's just a fantastic writing. When we read it and we admire the writer and we think, wow, this is beautiful writing, fantastic writing. This writer has an incredible talent, okay? Maybe you're familiar with writers like Yukio Mishima from Japan. He writes some of the most incredible sentences I've ever read. They're beautiful, very talented. Or a writer from South America, like Mario Vargas Llosa. He writes incredibly beautiful sentences, amazing stories about a world that's very different than mine. Maybe you know Haruki Murakami, the Japanese novelist and short story writer. He also writes some of the most fantastic literature that exists. And as for American writers, how about F. Scott Fitzgerald? He wrote some of the most exquisite and beautiful sentences and stories in English literature. When you read something by one of these writers, F. Scott Fitzgerald, for example, you're amazed at their talent. You're amazed at what you read. And if you're a normal person like me, you think, I will never write like this. I can't, because I don't have this magic talent that F. Scott Fitzgerald has. And we have a tendency to lift the author up on a high platform and think of them like a god, or a human gifted by the gods with a talent that I don't have. I think that's a mistake. I've met professional writers, and I've studied the masters like Fitzgerald and Murakami. And they are normal people like you and like I. They're not magically talented. They're not given magic gifts by the gods because they like them better. Yes, what you read is exquisite, flawless, but that's not the first words that this person wrote. One of the things you need to learn about writing, guys, is that all good writing is the result of rewriting. So when you read a book like this is the final draft, possibly of many drafts. Fitzgerald did not sit down and write this and then give it to his publisher and now you read it. That's not how that works. Fitzgerald wrote a draft, gave it to an editor. The editor gave him feedback and sent it back to Fitzgerald, and Fitzgerald wrote more and fixed his errors and cleaned up his sentences and took this out and put this in. And then back to his editor, and the editor gave them more feedback, and Fitzgerald wrote it again. Some writers do that for hundreds of drafts. Hundreds. Until finally, the writer, the editor, and the publisher all read it and go, that's amazing. That's exquisite writing. That's a great story. Let's publish it. Let's print. In university and high school, students are very busy and they have a lot of stress. And when they get an assignment to write an essay or a short story, guess what they do? They write it overnight before it's due and they hand it in to the teacher. That's a big mistake because often they're handing in a first draft. Ernest Hemingway, another great and famous American writer from the beginning of the 20th century, said this about writing. He said, the first draft of anything is shit. And he's one of the greatest writers in history. And he believed his first draft was shit. So, if his first draft is shit, we shouldn't worry about our first drafts, right? We should take that pressure off ourselves. We should write our first drafts knowing that it's going to be garbage, but that with feedback, we can improve it. That's the process. Write a first draft. Get all your ideas out, even if they're crazy. Fix them later. This is the creative process, guys. Get all your crazy ideas out. Feel that freedom. Just write. Then show it to someone you trust, someone who will give you honest feedback, someone who's qualified to, an English teacher, a literary editor, someone who also writes, someone who is qualified to look at that thing you wrote and give you some good feedback. Then take the feedback and make a second draft. Adjust it, clean it up, fix it. Use a software to fix spelling and grammar errors if you have to. Then do it again, until finally you've written something wonderful. But that takes time. It takes several drafts. So when you say, what if I can't write because I'm not talented? We're all talented, or none of us are talented. But here's the number one talent all writers have. The number one talent of all writers is that they don't mind sitting in a chair all day, because that's the job. Okay, I like to call this practice ass in chair. If you want to be a good writer, or any kind of writer, it's the number one thing you have to get used to. Put your ass in the chair and do it every day. That's what these writers did. They were comfortable being alone. Okay, they didn't need a lot of social activity every day. They're comfortable being alone, and they're willing to sit in a chair at their desk and do the work all the time. They didn't feel the need to go make a TikTok video, or go to the club, or go shopping, or go hang out with their friends. None of that was important to them. Their number one talent was they liked being alone. They liked to sit in a chair at a desk and write. Because if you want to make a book like this, that's considered a masterpiece, you need a little bit of talent, and you need a lot of time in the chair, okay? And you're not confident with your writing, you can get confident. Confidence comes from practice and preparation. The more you write, the better you feel about it. The more you write, the more confidence you will get. The more feedback you get from teachers and coaches. The more you learn, the more confident you become, okay? If you're not confident with something, it probably means you're not prepared. So get prepared, right? If you've ever done a presentation for school or business, you know that feeling when you're super terrified when you're terrified to give the presentation. Well, the way to get around that is to prepare, rehearse it, practice it over and over again. So when you finally do the presentation, you know you can do it because you have done it, right? True confidence comes from knowing you can do it because you've already done it before, whether it's practice or experience. So if you want to be confident with your writing, for example, in a test like IELTS, practice, 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 prepare. You'll never be a great writer in an IELTS exam if you start writing a week before. That's not enough time, okay? Make writing a part of your life, do it constantly, and you'll be prepared and confident. Another question students ask is, what if I can't write because I'm bad at grammar? Well, get good at grammar. That's one thing you can do. Study grammar. Get a teacher to help you improve your grammar. Practice your grammar, right? Grammar is important in writing because the sentence has to be clear, and grammar is the structure through which we pour our meaning. So to write well, it's important to have good grammar. However, there's a couple things you can do. Even if you just can't seem to get the knack for grammar, there's lots of great grammar programs out there, like Grammarly, or even the grammar program in Google Docs that will give you suggestions and you can learn ideas from. Software, AI, these are new tools now available that can help you improve your grammar, or at least clean up your mistakes. Another tool that I like is called Kaizen. Kaizen is an excellent feedback tool. Your teacher can put comments, post video comments, audio comments, and you can get grammar feedback through Kaizen. Also, get feedback from a person, an editor. As I mentioned with these famous professional writers, they write something, and if they make a mistake, it's okay because they're going to give their text to an editor. And the editor's job is to notice all the mistakes, give them suggestions how to fix them, and let the writer rewrite. So don't worry too much about the grammar. If it's bad, it can be fixed with software or with an editor. And that editor can be a teacher, a friend, or a tutor that you hire. There's lots of ways to do that so that you can clean up the grammar and fix it before you publish or present your work. Now, I also recommend doing that. For example, if you're a blogger or a social media poster, it's really easy to write something quickly and then publish it, send it out into the world. I recommend checking the grammar before you do that, right? Because if you have bad grammar in your published work or your posted work, people will judge you. The worst case scenario is they won't understand your idea, right? Because grammar expresses the meaning. And if the grammar is wrong or inaccurate, the meaning that you intend will not be clear. So it is worth getting the grammar right. But there's lots of ways to do that, okay? I understand this, right? If you've been working hard on your writing and you try to do the IELTS and then you don't get the score you thought you could, it's frustrating. Well, my advice is don't give up. Try again. Get some help. Get a tutor or a coach to help you improve your writing, and then maybe do some IELTS practice tests beforehand. Another thing is there are kind of two kinds of coaches that can help you prepare for an IELTS test. One is an expert in the test itself, and they can teach you test preparation techniques to get you ready for the test. Another type of coach, which is what I do, is I help improve the student's overall writing ability so that whatever test they take, IELTS, TOEFL, TOEIC, anything, they're going to get a better mark because their writing is better. If your writing is good, you will get a good mark. Even if you have only limited knowledge of the test itself, you can still get a great mark if you have great writing. So I recommend working with a tutor or a coach to develop your writing skills overall, all of them, okay, including grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure, sentence variety. Learn how to use all these things powerfully, and you'll get a great mark on the test, okay? Because in the end, the IELTS test, or TOEFL, or TOEIC, or CELPIP, or any of those tests, they're simply tests of English. And if your English is good, in this case your writing, you'll get a great mark, right? If your English is not strong enough, you will not get a good mark. That's the truth. These tests are there to test your proficiency, your ability. So, develop the ability. I realize that schools, teachers, coaches, tutors, this all can be very expensive. There are other options. There are lots of writing groups on Facebook, for example, or LinkedIn, where people can share their work with each other. Get feedback, learn what you can. There are lots of videos online. There are lots of books available from the library, how to improve your writing. Do the work. There's no magic solution. Writing is a skill. It's like learning how to play a sport like hockey or tennis or basketball. You have to study, you have to watch professionals and see what they do, and then you have to practice. Okay, you have to practice. Practice your writing, get feedback, change your writing, get feedback. That's how you learn to be better at something. And writing is no exception. I understand this feeling because many times in my life, I've found my writing to be frustrating. It wasn't coming out the way I wanted, or I couldn't put into words my thoughts, or I finished something, sent it away to a publisher or a magazine or a blogger to post it, and they rejected it and said, no, we don't want it, thank you, but no. It's a terrible feeling. However, as I said at the beginning, if you're a writer, you are compelled to write. You have no choice but to write. You write every chance you get. If you have free time or on a weekend, you're writing. If you really want to write, write. So, there are lots of opportunities to feel frustrated with writing. There are lots of moments where you'll feel like no one likes my writing, no one wants to publish it, nobody reads it. I post something on social media and nobody presses like. No one reads it. Well, all I can tell you is that someday, somewhere, somebody will read it. And that person will be impacted by your writing. They're waiting to discover your writing. It's just a question of connecting your writing with that reader. They're out there in the world, and it takes time to connect to them. Ultimately, that's what a publishing company does when they publish your book. They put it out into the world, into the stores. Some people will read it and hate it. Some schools will give it to a high school student to read, no choice, as part of the curriculum, and the student will hate it. Somebody will read it and be so moved that it becomes their favorite book, and they read it 10 times, and it changes their life. So keep going. We talked about the skills and the gifts or the talents that the master writers have. This is another one. They never stop. If you want to write, 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 write. Put your ass in the chair every day and write. Don't wait for inspiration to come out of the sky and give you ideas. It doesn't work like that. Inspiration isn't out there, it's in here. If you want ideas, write something. Ideas start happening when you're writing. Inspiration comes from writing. You write something, you read it and get a new idea. You write something and put it away. A few days later, read it, you'll have new ideas. The number one way to avoid feeling like giving up, to avoid procrastinating, is simply to write every day. Make it a habit. Build it into your life. Some people procrastinate and avoid going to the gym and taking care of their health because they're trying to figure out the best time to go, or I don't feel like it. If you want to improve your health in the gym, you have to go every day or whatever your schedule is, even if you don't feel like it. Do it anyway. And it's the same with writing. Make it a habit. Find a time of the day where it's quiet, no one bothers you. Doesn't matter if it's night or morning. I like to write in the morning. I get up very early every day, 3 or 4 a.m. Yeah, 3 or 4 a.m. because it's quiet in my home. Nobody is sending me emails or text messages yet because they're all asleep. So I'm private. I'm not distracted by the internet. Stay away from the internet. And I write every morning. A lot of days I'm tired and I don't feel like it. Some days if I go to a party and I have a couple of drinks, I'm a little bit hungover, I really don't feel like writing, but I do it anyway. And what I write that day might be garbage. It might be nonsense, but it gets me to the next day. And even if I'm writing garbage, good ideas will emerge. The trick is to constantly write and never stop. If you never stop writing, if you make it a habit, you don't have to worry about procrastinating because you'll never be stopped. And you won't have to worry about the feeling of giving up because even while you're feeling like giving up, you're writing. Okay? So just write, write, write. Don't put yourself in the position where you have to come back to the writing. Just do it every day. Make it a habit. Make it a scheduled part of your life. Could be the morning, could be the afternoon, it could be while you're on the bus, could be late at night when everyone goes to bed. Whatever fits your schedule, find that time, make a habit of it, and write. Later in my life, in my 30s, I came back to writing after not writing for many years. The first thing I did was start reading about writing and reading good writing. Remember in the old days, like 100 years ago, the great writers didn't go to university and take writing classes. They took literature classes and read the great books that had come before them and learned the techniques of good writing from the masters, from what they do. Just like when I was a child, I loved watching basketball players, and then I'd run out in the street and try to imitate them. That's how you start. You read great writing, and you try to imitate it. Try to figure out how they did that. However, nowadays, there are lots of books about writing, about how to improve writing. I can even put a few in the links below. So when I started writing again in my 30s, I started buying and signing out from the library all sorts of books about writing. Not just one, because I wanted everyone's ideas, and I would use the best ideas or ones that fit me best. So I studied how to write better. That's one thing you can do. If English is your second language, for example, and you're still working on the language elements, well, you've got to work on that too. You've got to improve your grammar, vocabulary, and structure skills. So you can learn how to write from books. That's one way. You can watch videos. You can take a digital course, like my writing workshop course, that has video lessons that you can download and which explain the techniques that make writing great. Another thing you can do is you can hire a private tutor or coach, like I am hired by students, to work with them one-to-one and improve their writing step by step and give them feedback. Ultimately, you'll need feedback. That's the number one thing a writing teacher gives you is feedback. In university, I took some writing classes, and we didn't sit there all day listening to lectures. We were expected to know the basics of writing, how to tell a story, how to write dialogue, for example. What we did was we wrote every week, we'd write a new story, and then we'd share it with the group in the workshop and the teacher, and then we'd get feedback, and then write it again based on the feedback. And getting feedback from a variety of people is powerful because they all see something different in your writing. So if you can join a writing workshop where you share your writing with others and they share it with you, that's a very powerful way to improve your writing, because not only do you get feedback on your writing, you're expected to give feedback on others' writing. So you develop an editor's eye, looking at the writing from the reader's point of view and analyzing what you're reading and make suggestions. And it's a very open and encouraging environment. So join a workshop if you can. And if you can't, join an online workshop or hire a writing coach if you have the resources, although that can be expensive, there's no doubt about it. Nowadays, as I mentioned, there are lots of writing courses in universities. Even if you're finished university, you can take a course after work at a university. They offer adult learning courses. That's one way. In the end, though, the number one thing I suggest for anyone to improve writing is reading. Read, read, read. As I said at the beginning, writing and reading are two sides of a coin. If you want to learn how to do something, play basketball, tennis, how to sing, you have to study the masters. You have to study what has come before you. Learn from them. So the greatest writing teachers aren't in university. They're right here in these pages. Read the great literature. Read great news articles. Read articles about topics you love. If you're a sports fan, for example, read Sports Illustrated magazine. There are great journals, there are great journalistic articles there written by great writers. Read literature, read poetry, read the back of product labels, read everything. It will give you ideas. It will teach you sentence structures that you can try, and it will open your mind to new ideas and inspire you, right? So you've got to read. That's the number one way to improve writing, is to read. One more thing. A lot of language students just want to learn language so that they can travel or meet friends from another country. Great. One way to improve your speaking is reading and writing. Well, that's two ways, I guess. Yeah. Everything's connected with a language. Listening, speaking, reading, writing. They all work together. If you want to improve speaking, read a lot. If you want to improve reading, write a lot. If you want to improve listening, speak a lot. They all work together. So do all of those things if the language you're writing in is a second language. If you want to improve your writing, you've got to write a lot. Get feedback and write again. Remember what I said earlier. All great writing is the result of rewriting. So you're going to have to do that. Just like if you want to practice basketball, you're going to have to shoot 1,000 baskets by yourself before you can hit the basket in a game, right? So writing is a skill. It's not a knowledge to memorize. It's a skill that you do. So you're going to have to practice. So again, as I said in the last question, write every day. Find some time every day to write, even a little bit. Over time, it adds up. Well, the answer is yes. You absolutely can. Everybody can improve their writing. Not everyone will become a professional writer. Not everyone has the natural abilities that will lead them to become a great writer or a famous writer. But a lot of people can, and everyone can improve. Everyone can get better from where they are today to where they can be tomorrow. It's possible. Writing is a skill, and skills can be learned. Now, as I said earlier, the great writers may have been born with some kind of genetic ability in their brain that's good for languages, okay? And then their education taught them grammar, vocabulary, and reading taught them the possibilities of writing. All of that worked together to make great writers. But you can improve greatly through all the techniques we've talked about today, guys. Developing an idea is sentence by sentence giving the reader new information. We don't want to read something and then read the same thing written a different way. We want progression in writing. This kind of development is something I teach in my online course. So if you're interested in that, I'll give you the links later and check that out. But everyone can learn this. Everyone can learn the skill of how to develop an idea with complexity, precision, and depth. And that's what we're after. Why do we need that? Well, it's simple. Life is complex and deep. The world that a baby sees and understands is very simple. And so their language is very simple. But by the time you're an older person, an adult, you understand that the world is incredibly complex. Humans are incredibly complex. Our experiences are incredibly complex. And we need language to communicate and share that. Writing allows us to do that. Learning to develop your ideas fully with complexity and nuance and depth that reflects the way you see the world with complexity, nuance, and depth. That's an important and powerful skill, and I urge you to develop it. And there's no doubt in my mind you can. If I can help you write better, I'd love to be able to. That's one of the things I love most. But also participating in challenges like MAKI's Writer's Carvings challenge allows you a chance to practice and get feedback and meet other writers and share your ideas. Community. Even though we write alone, being part of a community of writers can be very supportive and powerful. Because remember, we often feel discouraged and feel like giving up. And when you're around other writers who also feel like that sometimes, we can push each other to keep writing. Even though we live now in a world where a lot of the information and stories we consume are in the form of video, we actually write more than ever before now. Maybe not everyone reads long novels, but every day I guarantee you everyone reads text messages and emails. Writing more than ever is incredibly important, and I believe everyone can improve their writing, whether it's through taking a writing workshop, reading books about writing, reading novels and articles or essays, or participating in a writing workshop, taking a course. There are many ways to improve writing. But the number one thing you have to do, guys, is write. Spend some time every day writing. Get feedback. Write again. I started working on a novel in the year 2006. I still haven't published it. Why? Because I'm still writing it. In fact, I've written hundreds of drafts of this novel. Hundreds. I haven't given up writing drafts of that story because I have to tell that story. I feel a need to tell that story and write that novel. And until it's the novel that I imagine in my mind, I'm not ready to publish it. It's getting close, by the way, but you have to be patient with something like a novel. A novel is a big project. You have to be patient, give it time, and be prepared to write and rewrite. Once I lost my file, my software crashed, and I lost my file entirely, so I had to start from the beginning. I was crushed. I was devastated. But I needed to write. So I kept writing and wrote another draft and developed it further. So even someone like myself, a writing teacher, writes and rewrites and rewrites and rewrites draft after draft. It's normal. It's part of the process of creating something really good. That's my goal with that novel. Now, for those of you writing English writing tests, you only have one chance to write it in the test. So do your practice beforehand. Work with a coach or a tutor weeks and weeks beforehand so you get lots of practice time so that when you sit down for the IELTS test, for example, you can write a decent first draft. It'll never be as good as possible because you don't have a chance to revise it, but you can write a decent one. My point is this: everyone can learn to write better. And I also think everyone should, because writing is one of our most powerful means of communication. And I think everyone should have some ability to write. For those of you who are really driven to write well, do it. Write, write, write. Wake up in the morning or stay up at late at night, whatever the case, put your ass in the chair and write. The world is waiting to read what you write. There are readers out there who love to read, and they're waiting to read your ideas or your stories. Share your writing. overcome those feelings of, oh, what if people don't like it, or wonder what they're going to say. You have to get past that feeling and just put your writing out in the world. In conclusion, I want to say this, guys. Thank you for being with me today. And if you're interested, you can easily find my writing workshop at www.writingworkshop.thinkific.com. You can find me on social media at Hardboiled English, at The Grammar Detective, hashtag Grammar Detective. You can find me on YouTube with Hardboiled English. You can find me on YouTube with Grammar Detective. It's been a pleasure talking about writing today with you. And I look forward to the day when I read what you write, because I'm tired of reading these guys. I want to read what you write.